Was on the building site where I worked. Two Algerians came asking for a job. I told them there wasn't any work and to try somewhere else. I went into the office and one of them closed the door. He was 2 meters away holding a gun, telling me not to move. I went at him and we fought. He didn't fire, but I got beaten around the head. It was after that my father forced me to leave for France.
In the 2 months after independence, around 1.5 million European settlers abandoned their homes in Algeria following a series of massacres against them.
You mustn't forget that hundreds of thousands of Algerians died in that war. It's fundamental. Every Algerian family was affected by the war, the cruelty, the violence, the tragedy. And the desire for vengeance existed. You can't sit back calmly when your whole family's being killed.
Many Europeans settled in France, often arriving here at the southern port of Marseille.
I remember myself waiting in the queue at 5 in the morning to get a ticket for the boat. For me it was temporary. I never expected that I'd stay in France all my life.
For Algeria, independence did not mean peace. Often plagued by political violence, it has taken a course that has held no place for Europeans like Georges. Like many, he settled on France's Mediterranean coast, across the sea from what was once his home. While nostalgic for the life he once had there, he respects the right of Algerians to self-determination. But not all veterans are so accepting. These men and women are gathering for a meeting of what's called the Association for the Defense of Former Prisoners and Exiles of French Algeria. Most were former OAS members, and more than 4 decades on, they remain firm in their belief that France should never have given up Algeria.
My biggest regret is that people don't recognize de Gaulle's betrayal. There's no reason to put on a pedestal the one who betrayed France. We'll forget once everyone has recognized de Gaulle's betrayal, but we'll never forgive him.
Few French have much sympathy for former OAS members like these and their claims of betrayal. The ill treatment of another group of French veterans, however, is undoubted. The 150,000 Algerian Muslims who fought for France and who are still referred to as Harkis. Ahead of independence, they were forcibly disarmed by the French army, who stood by as thousands were tortured and killed by Algerian independence fighters who regarded them as traitors.
One day I saw an Harki from the area running towards the village, screaming because a number of Algerians had tried to cut his throat. He had escaped but was bleeding from the neck and was beside himself in pain and fear. But my captain said to him, "Listen, we can't help you. We've liberated you. You're no longer part of the French army. You've got to leave."
Unlike the European settlers, and despite the clear danger to their lives, Algerians who had fought for France were forbidden from immigrating to the former colonial power. But through the kindness of individual French commanders, several thousand were illegally smuggled into France. On arrival, they were confined to primitive rural camps. This is the site of such a camp, in which these men used to live. It was finally demolished only in 1995.
On vivait entre nous, on n'avait pas de vue sur l'extérieur.
In the camp we lived communally, without any relation to the outside world. No French kids were with us. We were Arabs and didn't know what racism was. It was only when I was in college that racism came along. We were treated differently, always put at the back of the class. And we found it very difficult to find jobs.
Today, former residents of the camps remain a tight-knit community. They continue to demand recognition for France's responsibility for their plight.
They said we were there to defend Republican values, and then they left us without arms to our destiny. We want France to admit its responsibility for those of us who died in Algeria, and for our abandonment in France.
For some, the memory of Algeria is still painful.
I won't go back. I won't go. Of course, my family's there, and I'd love to see them. But I'm scared. I'm really scared I'll be killed. It's my country, but I can never go back.
Decades on, enmities from the war in Algeria continue to haunt the Algerians who fought for France and their descendants. Their fate has been curiously intertwined with that of post-independence Algeria. For several million Algerians have immigrated to France, the former colonial power they fought, in search of better economic opportunities. These Algerians have never forgiven what many regard as the treachery of their countrymen who chose to side with the French against the independence movement. And in the suburbs of Paris and Marseille, where much of the Algerian immigrant community is concentrated, Harki remains a dirty word.
At
one time we lived in an area of Marseille full of Algerian immigrants. And when I used to play, my mother would put her finger on her mouth, telling me never to mention that we were Harkis. Because there was still that fear that even here, in France, we'd be killed.
Following the war, the French state was quick to draw a line under it. An amnesty was put in place for all crimes committed during the war, and for decades it was veiled in official silence. Only in 1999, and partly under pressure from the Algerian immigrant community, did the National Assembly officially admit that a war had taken place. And this small monument was erected on the banks of the River Seine. But it was in the year 2000 that the silence surrounding the war was well and truly shattered. General Paul Osores published a book in which he admitted his part in the systematic torture that was practiced by the French during the Battle of Algiers.
I believe General Algerie's committed war crimes in Algeria, crimes against humanity. But his book shows that he committed these crimes under orders from members of the government. He carried out the orders. But the people above him were quite simply able to bury the past.
And they continued to bury the past by putting General Osores and his publishers on trial in order to suppress the book and convicting them of condoning war crimes. For many, Osores is the scapegoat of a nation still unable to face up to its own responsibility for the conduct of the war in Algeria. A war in which the French values of liberty, equality and fraternity were badly compromised, and which continues to cast a dark shadow over France's relationship with its own Muslim community. Osores himself, however, remains unrepentant.
The middle of the trial, the lawyer said, listen, if you say the word regret, there will be no trial, no trial. I said, listen, no, I cannot say that. I cannot say that. No, I will not say I regret. There is a song of Edith Piaf. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. That's my song, you know. I don't regret. I didn't like, but I don't regret.
شعارنا الوفاء والسلم والهدى غاياتنا الكرامة والعدل والصفاء كفاحنا شريف والنصر حليفنا أنا ابن بلادي والعين الساهرة أنا ابن بلادي والعين الساهرة أنا ابن بلادي والعين الساهرة شعارنا الوفاء والسلم والهدى غاياتنا الكرامة والعدل والصفاء كفاحنا شريف والنصر حليفنا أنا ابن بلادي والعين الساهرة أنا ابن بلادي والعين الساهرة أنا ابن بلادي والعين الساهرة